I faced a $5 million lawsuit due to my gynecologist taking me on a 5-year court battle. This is my story on why I no longer trust people. A while ago, I changed insurance, which led me to also change my gynecologist. I searched online and opted for one affiliated with the hospital associated with my university, as this is an institution that I trust. I went there, but the entire appointment felt uncomfortable as he did all kinds of tests my previous doctor never did. As it was only a first visit, I brushed it off and told myself I would just never return. Little did I know, it wouldn't be the last encounter with him. He wouldn't let go of me for the rest of his life. It all began with a call informing me of a positive herpes test result. The nurse explained to me that it would never go away and would need to keep visiting for the rest of my life. Overwhelmed, I reached out to numerous people in a panic, including the nurse whom I called multiple times. Unfortunately, she couldn't address my concerns and refused to connect me with the doctor. I kept panicking until I noticed that the test results seemed strange. It turned out that the strain of herpes detected was not the typical STD variety, herpes 2, but the nurse insisted on my diagnosis, pushing for additional visits. In order to make sure the test results were accurate, I went to a different place and took the herpes test 4 times. Every result was negative. It turns out I didn't have herpes at all. I felt deceived because I had apparently been tested for herpes 7. The doctor told me that this was a standard test for everyone, but the way the nurse tricked me made me suspicious about the whole ordeal. Despite everything, I decided to move on. However, a few weeks later, things got worse when I received a bill for $480. Originally, my insurance was supposed to cover my annual visit, but they changed the reason for my visit to pelvic pain, which I didn't have. I realized the doctor guided me into this reason by asking if I ever experienced cramps and if they were painful. It now made sense to me what all those additional tests were for. He conducted an ultrasound, which felt unusual, but as he was only the second gynecologist I had seen, I went along with it. The ultrasound itself was uncomfortable, as he pointed out minor issues that he claimed could become problems in the future. I got in contact with my insurance, but all they did was send me a letter stating I deserved a refund. Unfortunately, that was all they did, and of course the doctor refused to comply. The insurance did send an investigator, but I learned that he had locked himself in his office, refusing to come out. Consequently, the insurance was unable to obtain my records, at least dropping him as a selected provider. In order to do something about this malpractice, I sued him in small claims court, citing the issues with the herpes diagnosis and quoting how I had no say in my healthcare decisions. The whole experience had been overwhelming, prompting me to write a review as a warning to others. I felt it was important to share my story, hoping to prevent others from going through the same ordeal. I believed I was doing something positive by alerting people to the potential risks. Looking back, this was a horrible decision, but back then, I did not know he was utterly insane. I proceeded with the lawsuit, and eventually won back my $480 almost 2 years later in small claims, but it had cost me much more. 13 days after posting my review of his services, I received an email from a lawyer stating that he was suing me for defamation, seeking a whopping $1 million. Initially, I thought it might be a joke, but unfortunately, it wasn't. Feeling uncertain about how to handle the situation, I decided to take the review down, even though it had only been up for 13 days. Despite this action, he persisted in suing me relentlessly and aggressively. Over the next 5 years, he used all the possibilities of the court system to harass me to the fullest extent. I took on the task of defending myself for the initial 6 months, considering that hiring a lawyer can be quite costly. During this period, I learned a lot. I learned how to e-file, write answers. I learned a lot about defamation law, how to ask the court to do things, file motions. Of course, no one does this because one motion as a non-lawyer took multiple offices and 5 hours. Nevertheless, I pushed through and successfully countered every legal challenge he threw at me. The first hurdle was an order to show cause, where he alleged that tens of thousands of people had viewed my Yelp review during its 13-day duration. He sought tens of thousands of dollars, in addition to the initial $1 million, as immediate relief. He even attempted to make me go to jail, citing contempt as the basis. Furthermore, his legal team went to extreme lengths by publicly posting my complete medical records, including my photo, insurance number, examination details, intimate body information, mental health details, address, and more, on a public docket accessible to anyone without prior proceedings or permission. Shockingly, he managed to accomplish this, and even included false information to overcharge my insurance. When I tried to correct these claims, he said he had locked my records, preventing me from requesting corrections. You might think now that these are clear HIPAA violations, which they are. Despite my complaints, however, the responsible parties repeatedly assured me that no action would be taken. Even when I escalated the matter to the medical board, they initially dismissed my concerns until I contacted the head of the OB/GYN board. This triggered a swift investigation, but it was dropped due to a lack of evidence, despite the readily available records. From my first-hand experience, it's clear that trusting these organizations will leave you disappointed. In an act of retaliation, I decided to countersue, but the judge dismissed it, arguing that since I had publicly discussed my visit in the review, I had no rights to pursue further legal action. I got very angry and filed complaints everywhere. As it all continued to go on, it made me tired and exhausted. I was traumatized. I lost 28 pounds from not eating. Finally, I caved, and I hired some power attorney that ended up being pretty bad at his job. He assured me he would handle my case, but all he ever handled was me getting rid of my savings. I spent almost $30,000 on 3 months of work, including a settlement and motion to dismiss. That went nowhere. The only thing the lawyer ever did good was that he stumbled upon insurance fraud. He was an ex-prosecutor of bad doctors for the feds, and he told me he found lots of false claims. With this info, I went to the FBI and filed a whistleblower suit. As I felt desperate and didn't trust the FBI to take my case seriously, I went to the media. Next thing I knew, I was number 3 in trending. While no one cared about all of the laws the doctor was breaking, at least his main hospital was pressured and they fired him. Not because of the investigations or the actual laws, but just because my story went viral. They claimed they let him go because of the law, but when I originally filed my complaints to his hospital, they did nothing. They said he wasn't directly affiliated with them even though his face was everywhere on their website. This is what I felt to be my only victory. And boy did it make the doctor mad. He increased his lawsuit to $5 million. After I went to the media, he tried to defend himself and told a paper he was suing me for his honor. The additional $4 million amount represented his honor. I didn't even know you were allowed to sue for your honor, but he did. As the lawsuit continued on, many of his ex-patients reached out to me. Many of them were overbilled. Others also freaked out by his ultrasound, and even some others were told they had herpes as well. Apart from the same experience I had gone through, I also heard more horrific stories. I figured that he used the ultrasound to make his patients panic, so he could force them into the ultimate moneymaker, his surgeries. Many of them were told they needed immediate surgery, as he claimed he had to remove parts of their female reproductive organs. Some of these operations went badly, and when the patients would call back to him for help, he would ignore them. I am unsure all of these stories are real, but I can say that I have heard these multiple times from many different people. I didn't know what to do with this info. I went back to the FBI agents that left their names, but they closed the case and never contacted anyone. Desperate for action, a couple of the patients and me got together and filed a medical board complaint. But guess what? Nothing happened from that because, if you don't know by now, there is no justice unless you go viral and get people's attention. The doctor, meanwhile, tried to do some reputation control and took out some low-level ads, calling himself the best in the world. He was delusional in that way. He always had to be the best. Whenever I saw him, his head was high. He was arrogant. I only spoke to him one time after that single visit I had with him. He looked up at me from the court with the most serious face and said one thing where he victimized himself and asked why I was doing this to him. Anyhow, he didn't like the medical board investigation, so he filed 2 more lawsuits against the 2 patients that complained with me for $1 million each, alleging they wrote reviews they claimed they didn't write. He started to harass them too. I felt so bad that we teamed up to complain expecting justice, because it was my idea. A woman he targeted didn't have the same resources as me, and this put her under great stress. He kept abusing the court system as much as he could. He would ask internet companies left and right, asking for any info he could get on us, like we were some high-level crooks. He even demanded my computer, but luckily his demands were rejected most of the time. All of this went on for 5 years. During this period I was always stressed. I went through 4 motions of contempt. He was always trying to hurt me. I will forever have PSTD, and I have moments where I just start talking to strangers about my story. They likely think I am insane. Now we finally came to the part where his claims would be handled by the court. He claimed he had lost so much business. He, however, never submitted a single patient by name. When he came up with proof of the damages he had suffered, he submitted his entire list of patients, including 3 years before I ever met him. He claimed that every patient that never paid him, even before I met him, was because of my 13-day review. And guess what else? Every amount the insurance refused to pay him, that was my fault too. Then one day he became less aggressive all of the sudden, and he tried to settle with me for nothing. 5 years of using the court to harass me, and suddenly he wanted nothing. It appeared that a new law had passed that would put the burden of proof on him before the conclusion of our case. I was sure to win, as he had nothing, so he wanted out. I was feeling good. It was a law passed to protect people like me from lawsuits like this. So I made him get on call with his lawyer and wasted his time like he did with me. I had tried to settle years prior, but he always refused, so I told him I would not negotiate with people like him. I won my case based on the new law. The doctor owed my lawyer all legal fees, allowing some financial breathing space again. Except my victory lasted exactly 24 hours because a person in another high-profile defamation case got the retroactivity, lawsuits that were started before the new law, of the new law overturned in the First Circuit appeals. The doctor was still open for settling, and I almost signed the settlement as I assumed it could have gone on for years, but I saw he put in multiple clauses that could still get me in trouble. So I did not end up signing and continued on. Time went on, and I heard the news that the doctor had passed away. Soon after his death, his lawyers posted a motion to be relieved from the case because he owed them tens of thousands in legal fees, which they would never receive. This meant that no one would be pursuing this case any longer, which meant I had won again. My lawyer even assured me that we would be able to win a claim for $30,000 for defamation on my end. A happy ending, you would say, but my lawyer made a mistake. He missed a deadline to make a claim for my case, so my $30,000 is gone, and it will never be on the books that I won my case. I have learned that life can be unfair, and you should not trust people simply because they have a degree. True justice just doesn't really exist most of the time. I realize that this is a crazy story, but I am sharing it because the doctor, he never wanted me to tell it to anyone, ever. Sharing the story is the only victory, as how others viewed him was his most important asset. I would like to thank you all for taking your time for me to share this story. Take care.